From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. And coming up today, an extended visit with two individuals from the Farm Analyst program here at K-State, Duane Hund and LaVell Windsor. They'll discuss the economic state of Kansas farms as 2019 winds down and what challenges they see ahead for producers financially. Duane and LaVell will also go over the services that their program provides to you producers in evaluating your farm enterprises and mapping out a game plan for addressing those challenges. Also in today, K-State's Charlie Lee for his weekly visit, this time about the tree rubbing and scraping behavior of bucks and how that can be useful to you hunters. It's all ahead on Agriculture Today. For 25 years, K-State Research and Extension's Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services has been providing a no-cost, confidential place to call in and visit with an agricultural lawyer. Our experts are available to help you producers handle legal and financial issues. Explore your options and generate solutions. Call us at 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. This is the K-State Radio Network, and welcome once more to Agriculture Today. We'll set aside some time on today's broadcast to dig a little deeper into the economic conditions in Kansas farm and ranch country. As we're rounding out another crop production season, moving into the fall and winter, there's time to contemplate where a farm or ranch stands, financially speaking. And the individuals that are with us in studio now have a direct hand in doing just that with producers through the Farm Analyst program out of the Agricultural Economics Department here at Kansas State University. The Director of Farm Analyst, Duane Hund, is with us, along with the Senior Analyst with that program, LaVell Windsor, taking the temperature, if you will, of the economic conditions out there in Kansas production agriculture. Duane, start with you. How do you read things right now?
You know, I'd say the ship is steady as she goes right now. For a large majority of the producers, this isn't going to be too bad of a year from a yield standpoint, although there were certainly some areas that got hit real hard with the flooding and have less than optimal crops. But a lot of producers that have upland crops benefited from the abundant rainfall that we've had. So I think there's going to be an offset there. Certainly the grass component in the Flint Hills and other pasture lands have shown to be of excellent quality this year for most people. And therefore, I think a lot of the gains for the cow-calf producers are going to be hopefully better than average because calving last spring was not a fun event for a lot of them. And so they may end up mitigating some of the calf losses they had in the spring due to the wet, muddy conditions with better than average calf weights coming out this fall. We're real close to getting into the real heart of harvest right now. In fact, we probably are. I don't know if we're close to 50 or 60% on corn, and soybeans are rapidly coming out of the field with the weather conditions the way they are. And so we're just right on the verge of tallying up and getting a good handle on where we are.
The productivity may be there, but is the payoff to that productivity there? And that gets into the market situation. What are you seeing in that respect, LaVell?
Yeah, and, you know, this year has been challenging from so many aspects. I mean, certainly the weather was difficult, and then, of course, the market aspect has been difficult with all of the tariffs and the trade issues that we have not been able to solidify. There's been some opportunities for folks to do some forward contracting, and, of course, recently we've seen some prices come up a little bit. The unfortunate thing is we're coming off of so many, you know, several years here that have been difficult where people, there's many people who have carried forward loss from prior years, and we might be able to kind of hold our own this year, but it's not going to help us make up for the previous years where we've had difficulties. So there's still a lot of folks that are in challenging situations.
So this could be a stopgap year in a sense. Is that fair to say?
It could be. I think there will be some producers that might find some healing in this year with the cash flow setup, but of course expenses never seem to get less. And we were talking just the other day about the cost of repairs and the cost of hiring personnel to make major repairs, even minor ones on implements that are so sophisticated now. A lot of times the local farmer can't do what he used to do, and the bottom line is it's a never-ending struggle to keep up with the expense side of it, even if you make more money for the year you're in.
So this may be, as you say, Duane, a year of healing, or at least folks getting back into a stable situation for the short term. But what are the danger signs out there as you work with producers in helping work their way through some issues here? What are the main hang-ups, if you will?
Well, there could be so many. It's hard to say specifically, but the one thing we conclude every year when we work with producers is a tax return does not give you a good feel for where you are from a profitability standpoint. You need an accrual-based balance sheet done at the same time every year, usually after harvest, so there's no speculation about what the number of bushels of grain that you're going to have from this year's harvest are. You've got to have that accrual-based balance sheet to measure your progress and see if, in fact, you're slipping backwards, holding your own, or maybe you made some gains.
Mm-hmm. And now we're getting into what Farm Analyst can provide in terms of analyzing these things. LaVell, explain what Farm Analyst is all about.
Sure. So oftentimes, Farm Analyst, we meet with several clients once a year. So we have several clients that are annual clients, and then there's a lot of times that we might be brought in to work on one specific issue. In the last few years, so many of those situations are because it's a very difficult financial climate issue. It's maybe something the lender has requested us to come in, or just something major has to change because it's a negative situation. But we certainly also work with clients when they're looking at something expansion or succession. For the analysis, what we often do is we do utilize the FinPack software, which is a software out of the University of Minnesota. It's very thorough. We will always start with a balance sheet because we have to understand where you're at, and honestly, sometimes people need to understand better where they're at as well. And then we go through budgets. So each enterprise that a farm may have, whether that's the crops or the livestock, will create a budget for each of those. And then we'll build an accrual cash flow out of that. And so if a producer was to produce and sell all of their commodities in 1 year and then sell them all and pay all of their principal and interest payments, what does that look like at the end of the year? Just as Duane was just saying, that often doesn't happen because their tax forms look a little different because people are doing things from the cash accounting side. But this gives us an accrual outlook so that we can see, is this profitable or is it not profitable? And then we can start to look at where are those issues at. And then the really nice thing, I kind of looked at the analyst program as we're kind of the connectors. So say, for example, if somebody's having a problem with their cows, for example, we might be able to bring in a beef specialist and help them to deal with that specific issue. Or, if it's a succession issue and they need a good estate attorney, we have resources to do that. So we're somewhat connectors that we can help then network out to other folks that can also help them.
Now, the mechanics of the program, need to remind, are such that all of this takes place within the farm or ranch home. It's on site. Duane.
Exactly. We value confidentiality very highly with the families we work with because they have to trust us, and they do, and they know that their information will stay confidential. So therefore, we do make our visits at the farm home or where the office is located and spend that time necessary to put together those detailed analytical figures. So it's real critical that people feel comfortable with us being involved. Consequently, their lenders are also very enthused about us being involved because we can be a conduit from them, as LaVell said, to bring about some possible changes that the bank may see a need for, or a lot of times we come up with things the bank hasn't even thought of that could be beneficial. So we're a clearinghouse is what we are for the purpose of helping farm families seek solutions and find better avenues that they can travel down the road with.
And it doesn't have to be a one-time engagement. Repeat visits as necessary can be facilitated.
Certainly. Now, about 50%, I believe, of our referrals do come from the Kansas Ag Mediation Service. There is grant money through that service that provides for us to go out and work with farm families at a greatly reduced cost. But I've got quite a number of families over the years that I've worked with annually. They pay the entire fee for one day's service to bring about all of their financial statements, bring them up to date, look at their ratios, judge whether or not their solvency has increased or decreased, which is always the first lead indicator of a change in operations. And simply bring that history to the table. It's really helpful when I've worked with a producer 3 or 5 years or longer to do a spreadsheet of all their balance sheets, their financial statements, and see what the improvements or changes have been over time. That's when you get a really good idea, are we going down the right path?
Mm-hmm. And some alternatives are straightforward and semi-simple. Some are extraordinarily complex, right?
Certainly. And that is one of the things that we do. Once we're able to kind of wrap our arms around what their financial situation is, then we can start to look at alternatives of, and, you know, sometimes the alternatives may come from us, but as we work throughout the day, oftentimes the producer will say, you know, I've kind of been thinking about, or we've been thinking we need to, and we'll kind of take note of those alternatives as we go throughout the day, and then we can start to run those. Once we have a good handle of where they actually are at, then we'll run alternatives and look at, okay, is this a positive or negative impact? And then how dramatic is that? Is it going to add a whole bunch of work but hardly add anything to the bottom line? Or is it something that may add a reasonable amount of work, but it's a very positive impact?
And to go along with that, one of the things that we find ourselves being involved with quite often would be issues involving partners, fathers and sons. Quite often they are pulling down the same path, but they have a little bit different ways of getting from here to there. And oftentimes our goal is just to sit down and give them factual information that will help. A case in point would be Dad is told by the son, Dad, we really need to have more cows. We got to increase that. Dad says, well, I'm not comfortable going into debt. How do we make that happen for the benefit of the son if, in fact, the cows are working well for them? How can we help the son achieve his goals and at the same time make Dad feel comfortable with what the investment might involve?
Well, what we'd like to do in a few moments is ask the both of you what scenarios you might be anticipating as you work with farm families in the coming weeks and months through the Farm Analyst program. We need to take a break. If you could stand by for just a second. Joining us from Farm Analyst out of Agricultural Economics at K-State, Duane Hund and LaVell Windsor, and they'll return Mike's side in a moment. This is the K-State Radio Network and Agriculture Today.
Have you ever thought about where your food comes from? If you're thinking the grocery store, think again. Facts show that the American farmer feeds more than 129 people.
They are continually increasing and improving their operations. A wide variety of crops and livestock are grown in Kansas as well as the United States, providing food to your dinner plate.
Next time you see a farmer or rancher, thank them. For more information, contact K-State Research and Extension.
Agriculture Today returns now on the K-State Radio Network as we're in a conversation with two individuals from the Farm Analyst program out of the Agricultural Economics Department at K-State, Duane Hund and LaVell Windsor, talking about what that program can offer in the way of analytical assistance to farm families who are trying to work their way out of financial challenges. Right to that, Duane, we again note that maybe the returns to livestock and crop production won't be too shabby here coming out of 2019. There again, that doesn't mean that things will go flawlessly. What are you anticipating?
Well, I'm anticipating we're still going to be dealing with some situations that have a long-term trend of poor profitability. And you get to a level where you have to finally say, if we can't work our way out of this way our current situation is, what do we need to do to make things work better? Because ultimately, farmers have to build some type of equity to retire on. Social Security is there, but it's not going to provide for most farm families a reasonable retirement income. And, we really need to help them focus on what they need to do. There have been situations where I've demonstrated to people if we do sell an asset and reduce our debt, that overall our profitability can increase. We have less dollars that have to go towards interest and principal, and we might find ourselves to be in a better position of building wealth as we get into our later years.
In this arena, it's often cited the debt-to-asset ratio as a measurement of solvency, of financial stability. That's been fairly well in check in recent times, but again, that's something that should be watched for nonetheless.
Absolutely. One of the first key things that we look at is the debt-to-asset ratio in regards to current liabilities and current assets. Current liabilities, of course, is anything that we're going to raise and merchandise within a 12-month period is going to be saleable grains, hay, cattle, and crops. And then opposed to that, we look at the line of credit on the debt side of it and see how that ratio of working capital between the two of them, hopefully it's positive, meaning that we have more current assets than current liabilities. What can happen to a family, even though they show profitability, is to make their term debt payments for their land or the machinery and equipment or breeding cow payments, they end up borrowing against the line of credit to complete some or all of those payments. And so you're just shifting the debt from one level of the balance sheet to the other. That, of course, isn't sustainable. You can restructure and straighten that out. But if you have to do that more than twice in a 3 or 4 year period, we need to find a different approach if we can.
There is an interesting sidebar here, LaVell. There's an increase in the number of agricultural lending arrangements that an individual operation will be tied to, and that adds to the complexity, you say?
Certainly, yes. In the older days, we would think of just the line of credit that a producer might have with the bank. But, of course, in recent years, in the last 5 to 10 years, we've seen a lot more arrangements where producers are able to finance inputs and feed and so forth with other quasi-lenders. And so when we go and we look at the balance sheet, when we're creating the balance sheet, we say, okay, where are all the debts at? And when we get down to it, there's several other lenders that are also owed money. And sometimes that's complex when we go into the bank. If the bank has been the one who maybe has encouraged this analysis to be, and then we need to work something out, there may be more debt, and then how are we going to service all of that debt? And that has been a trend that we've seen with some families, not necessarily uncommon over the last few years, where what we would call a carryover line of credit, where people aren't able to pay off that line of credit this year or last year, and then it just kind of keeps building. And eventually we have to do something with that. And that's where sometimes even a sale of assets, obviously we need to work on profitability, but it may even encourage a sale of assets or refinancing some land to be able to make those payments and be able to pay that debt off.
Eric, as you know, I've been doing this 35 years now, and without question, there is more complex balance sheets than I've ever seen on the ag lending side of it. It used to be we'd have our land, we'd have our machinery and equipment, breeding stock, and the line of credit. Now we have lines of credit from the machinery companies, from the cooperative finances, our local co-ops or other elevators that are providing that. Of course, people still fall back on credit cards, but I don't see that as being abused as much as it once was. The bottom line is, a lot of debt can be racked up without the local lender knowing about it and suddenly coming along and saying, well, we need to do something different. We're not going to refinance your operation. And that should have been known to that family 2 or 3 years sometimes prior to the time that they are recognizing for what it is. This isn't the bank's fault. The bank simply is reacting to the information that they are given. But it behooves all of the individual farmers and ranchers out there to make sure that they give their balance sheets in a complete and comprehensive fashion to their lenders so their lenders can help them determine the viability and the success that they're having. A lot of our referrals come from ag lenders who say, we didn't realize just to what extent we were involved here, that there were these other debts out there, and we need help to figure out how to help this family in the right way.
Since we're into this, would it be prudent generally then for farm and ranch operations to restrict the number of lines of credit that they commit to keep this from getting too unwieldy?
Well, certainly. The trouble of it is that it comes along too easily. We have input supply companies that are offering 0% financing till the end of the crop year, and so the bank wants to get their payments made, and the lenders will demand that they get that grain check deposited to reduce that line of credit. And then the input supplier who financed the seed, the fertilizer, and the chemicals is left unpaid. Mm-hmm. When the line of credit should have been big enough for the bank to have accessed all of that. So, and not in every case is the free financing that's offered on some of these input suppliers really free. If it comes right down to it and you calculate it out, the early discounts for prepayment and just volumes and so forth are offsetting a lot of what they get in the way of what they think is free interest, and it's not always free.
One further thing, and this was mentioned earlier, it's always seemingly at the core of good management, and that is cost management, cost control. And LaVell, you encounter this all the time. Are producers being more practical in that sense, or is there still some gain to be made there?
Well, I think that the overall business management is just incredibly important right now. I know Dr. David Coles, I heard him speak earlier this year, and he talked about that producers, to be in good shape, they need to be 10% better in production, 10% better in cutting costs, and 10% better in merchandising their commodities as well. That is a lot of balls in the air to be experts at. I mean, we farm as well. I think all of us that are analysts do farm as well. We understand that is a really difficult thing to keep when you're trying to do all the various work that goes along on the farm as well. And so it is a lot for farmers to manage, but it's really critical. And then I think along with that, in the 80s, it was the interest rates are so high. Today, it's that the dollars are so high. I mean, it just is expensive for everything. And it really is a challenging time. But I guess that's comforting to some extent of people are not alone in that there's a lot of folks that are having challenges right now. But it is something that's going to be just very important to stay on top of.
I mentioned that the balance sheet and recognizing where your solvency and the working capital is. But one of the other key things that we provide is analysis of individual enterprise on each farm and understanding where their strengths are. And if we can plainly see that they're doing some things on their farm that are not competitive, just simply substituting those operations with something that's working better for them can improve their cash flow, and a lot of times significantly. And we have the ability to help producers analyze that.
And we'll finish with this. Farm families can utilize the Farm Analyst program, and noting that there are analysts all across the state of Kansas who will come to their farms or ranches, work with them one-on-one, and to get the ball rolling on this is as simple as how, Duane?
Well, contact the Kansas Ag Mediation Service. Talk to them out there. Their number is 800-321-3276. To get a referral to us if they qualify. If they'd rather just call us directly, start by calling me at my office. That number is 785-532-8601.
Parting thought, it's about getting in front of the problems you both stress, right?
Yes, it's really critical. I think probably one of our frustrations is we get referred to a farm and it's at a place where it's too late to have very many options. And so if a family feels like they need some sort of, we think of it kind of as a 30,000-foot view of their finances, we encourage folks to get ahead of it and call us sooner rather than later so that we have options that we can help them figure out at that point.
One of the best things we can do, Eric, is to help people alleviate their fears. A lot of times they'll come to us and they're fearful that things are really bad, and in which case they may be better off than they think they are, but they still need that information to give them the right path to choose.
The best to you and your associates as you interact with farm families here in the coming weeks and into the winter months to help them sort through their possibilities and working through their financial challenges. And we thank the both of you for being by today.
Thank you.
From the Farm Analyst program at Kansas State University, it's Director Duane Hund and Senior Analyst LaVell Windsor. Again, you can contact them 800-321-3276 through the Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services, or Duane directly 785-532-8601. And we'll return with more after these moments away. This is Agriculture Today.
Did you know every Kansas farmer feeds 128-plus people?
Kansas farmers are hard workers, dependable, authentic, and sensitive.
Not only do farmers put food on your table, but they put clothes on your back and fuel in your car.
For more information about Kansas farmers, visit K-State Research and Extension online or stop by your local Extension office. This message has been brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Agriculture Today continues now here on the K-State Radio Network. Eric Atkinson with you. And now today's agricultural news headlines, courtesy in part of DTN. Starting with this week's Kansas Crop Progress Report from the USDA for the week ending this past Sunday. First of all, the topsoil moisture supplies at 4% surplus, 68% adequate, 28% short to very short. Subsoil moisture supplies, 4% surplus, 71% adequate, and 25% short to very short. The winter wheat condition is at 55% good to excellent, 32% fair, 13% poor to very poor. Winter wheat planted 88%, that's very near the average for the date, and emergence at 62%, again right on the average. The corn harvest in Kansas, 74% in, that's behind the 82% average. And the soybean harvest is at 56%. That's nearly 60% average now. Sorghum harvest is at 51%. That's near the average of 49% for this date. Nationally, the row crop harvest remains the slowest it's been in a decade. The nation's corn harvest gained 11% last week to reach 41% as of Sunday, still 20% behind the 5-year average. Soybean harvest moved ahead 16% last week, reaching 62% done, still 16 points behind the average of 78%, and the grain sorghum harvest reaching 65%. That's ahead of the 5-year average of 62%. As of Sunday, 85% of the winter wheat in the nation was planted, slightly ahead of the 5-year average of 82%. Winter wheat emergence at 63%, near the 5-year average. In its first condition rating for the 2020 winter wheat crop, 56% of the wheat in good to excellent condition, and the 3 percentage points better than last year's rating of 53% good to excellent at the same time a year ago. And the USDA will detail its interim rules for hemp production today after the White House approved the department's rules for regulating hemp production nationally. The USDA sent the rules to the White House Office of Management and Budget for review in late June. The OMB has been reviewing the rules ever since. The USDA is planning to have rules out this fall so states and growers can get ready for the 2020 planting season. Producers and lawmakers say the USDA rules are needed because financial institutions in some situations right now are unwilling to do business with producers growing hemp over fears of drug enforcement. All but 4 states have passed laws allowing hemp production, but most states are still working on their rules or are waiting on USDA guidance before completing their rules. Next up on Agriculture Today, this week's edition of Milk Lines. Standing by with that, K-State dairy specialist Mike Brook. Mike?
Today I'd like to visit with our Kansas dairy producers concerning the sale of fluid milk in the United States during 2018. Actually, I'd like to go back all the way to 1975 and move forward to 2018 and just make you aware of some trends that we've seen in the fluid milk industry here in the United States. I think it's important that we consider these things as we look at how we position our farms in the future in terms of where we might be headed with raw milk. As we look at the data, one of the interesting things that we see is that the sale of fluid milk, or the amount of milk that we sell in the carton or in the bottle, has been actually fairly consistent up to about 2010. However, since 2010, we've seen a steady decline every year and actually have fallen off about 13% on the total pounds of milk that are marketed through fluid here in the United States. So that's on just the amount marketed. If you look at it on a per capita basis and you go back to 1975 moving forward through 2018, we've seen even a stronger decline on a per capita basis. Actually only seen a decline of about 35% since 1975. However, there are some bright spots as we look at the data. Most of you are aware that there's been a change in the thinking as to whether or not milk fat actually has negative health effects, and in many cases our health professionals are indicating that it might actually be better than some of the other fat choices that we might make. So as a result of that, in the last few years, we've actually seen a rebound in whole milk sales, actually on a total amount sold as well as on a per capita basis. We've seen some slight increases in whole milk sales. So that's a bright thing as we think about trying to move some of our product from the raw stage through the grocery store and also trying to move some milk fat to the consumer. So that seems to be very positive in what we're seeing in that part of the market. The other bright spot in our market has been flavored whole milk sales. Part of this probably is a result of some of the advertising and also some of the health benefits that have been associated with these types of products when it comes to sports and sports teams and rehydrating after sporting events. So in the last few years, we've actually seen an increase in the total amount of flavored whole milk sales going on here in the United States, as well as the per capita consumption of these types of products. As we look at the rest of the other types of fluid milk that we market here in the United States, actually total pounds as well as per capita pounds have been declining in the rest of the areas. So really the two bright spots that we see is an increase in whole milk sales, whether that be just in white milk or whether it be in the flavored whole milk sales area. So as a result, what does that mean for your dairy farm? Well, some positive things in that we are seeing a little bit of an increase in the sale of some of the fluid milk increases over the past few years. However, in general, the overall beverage milk is still down. So as we look at how we're going to market raw milk in the future, will we be marketing more of it through fluid milk? Most likely not. So we're going to have to look to other products, whether it be cheese or soft products that we might be selling to consumers to increase our utilization of milk here in the United States. Outside of that, we'll obviously have to look at trying to increase the amount of milk that we can export, whether that be through dried products or other manufactured products to other countries to utilize the raw milk that we're currently producing here in the United States, and also to provide for expansion of our current dairy herd as well as production. This is Mike Brook with K-State Research and Extension, encouraging our dairy farmers to think about how their raw milk will be used once it goes to the market, and celebrating that we do have some increases in a few areas of fluid milk sales here in the United States.
All right, Mike, many thanks to you. We'll be back with our regular visit with K-State's Charlie Lee. After this is Agriculture Today.
Did you eat today? Thank a farmer. A way to get more involved in agriculture is through 4-H and FFA. Through 4-H and FFA, we have been given multiple opportunities to grow as leaders and learn more about agriculture.
You can learn skills related to jobs, public speaking skills, and you get the opportunity to travel around the country and meet new people.
If you want more information about getting more involved in 4-H and FFA, visit them on their websites at kansasffa.org and kansas4h.org.
This Agriculture Today concludes with our weekly wildlife management segment, and Charlie Lee is aboard once again, wildlife specialist, K-State Research and Extension. Well, we've been talking, Charlie, about tracking deer in recent programs, and one way that hunters can figure out where deer are frequenting, in fact, quality bucks, looking for those deer scrapes and rubs, and explain what those are.
Well, antler rubbing of small trees by male white-tailed deer has been reported for a long period of time. Hunters have anticipated hunting season when those rubs start appearing in the landscape. But those rubs are actually places where bucks rub their antlers on trees and shrubs and typically remove some of the bark off of those trees. Those rubs continue through the breeding season. Oftentimes, those bucks select highly aromatic trees, something like pines and eastern red cedar, but not always. One buck can make 300 to 400 rubs each fall, and typically older bucks make more rubs than the younger ones. The usual interpretation of the behavior of why they're doing the rubbing has been to remove the velvet from their antlers or to practice competition, if you will, or fighting for breeding season. But I think more current literature has showed that rubbing really serves as a territorial marking behavior. Now, scraping, or the pawing of the ground and the marking underneath or on those clear soil scrapes hasn't been as well documented, but typically it's in an area that a male deer will find an overhanging branch. They will chew, lick, rub on that overhanging branch. Those branches may be from 3 feet to 6 feet above the ground. They leave scent from their nasal, preorbital, and forehead glands on that branch. Then directly under that branch, they will paw out a clear area in the soil that may be 3 to 4 feet in diameter. They clear the leaves and vegetation from that with their front feet, and then they will urinate over their tarsal glands. That leaves a tremendous amount of scent in that particular area. And I think both bucks and does make scrapes, but they're predominantly made by bucks. And again, scraping apparently serves to be a means of communication between bucks and does during the breeding season, and rubbing, typically the function is to mark areas and establish dominance in preparation prior to breeding.
Do bucks tend to select particular types of trees for rubbing?
Well, that's been looked at in a lot of different areas, and it's variable depending upon the area of the U.S. that behavior is seen in. Bucks return to a few rubs, but not always. Some of those rubs are often referred to as traditional rubs. Those would be rubs that have been visited by multiple bucks and perhaps even does across multiple years. And those are used repeatedly over successive years, usually on larger diameter trees than non-traditional rubs. But just because it's a larger tree doesn't necessarily mean that the bucks that use that rub are all big, because young bucks with small antlers also use those more traditional rubs, which are found on the larger diameter trees. I think those traditional rubs are also have some sort of communication purpose, as the bucks rub their forehead gland on the tree, leaving those cues for other bucks and does to receive and possibly reply or communicate with their own information.
And has it been established through research that, in fact, this behavior does increase the mating opportunity for bucks?
Yes, they leave primer pheromone scents in their rubs. First, that scent can accomplish many things for the buck, but first of all, it can attract does, particularly during mating season and for the mating and kind of the pre-mating ritual of the buck. The scent can also reduce the sex drive of younger and weaker bucks. This increases the mating chances of stronger bucks, which comes into play when deer are defending territories. That scent also displays the buck's social status, and that the larger, more prime bucks leave a stronger scent behind, which stimulates does and detracts the approach of younger bucks. Certainly, these secretions that are left behind in scrapes and rubs are important, and we're continually learning more new things about those, although hunters have utilized scents and rubs for many, many years to help them collect that trophy animal.
Let's talk about that just a little more then. As a hunter, how does one make the best use of the, quote, information provided by these buck rubs and scrapes?
Well, rubbing and scraping marks territory. So when you find fresh rubs and scrapes, you know that there are bucks in the area. By identifying, soil condition, you can tell when a scrape is being actively used. Those are areas that a hunter might want to set up in. In those areas where traditional rubs are found, those would be good areas to set up a hunting stand or a location in those particular areas. But keep in mind that fresh scrapes may not be the best place to set up your stand on. I think the science there has shown that most of the scraping activity occurs at night. In fact, I think the study said more than 85% of that scraping behavior occurred at night. But I think scrapes also give you a pretty good indication of the trail that buck is going to be utilizing. So set up on rubs and scrapes that lead to those areas. Those are good locations for scouting cameras, for trail cameras. And if you're interested in mature deer, those cameras really take a lot of the guesswork out of which animals are using rubs and which ones are using scrapes.
Well, once more, there's background on that buck behavior, their scraping and rubbing activities during the breeding season. Once again, a sign that you hunters can rely on as far as local buck activity. Charlie, thanks for the word right here. Charlie Lee is a wildlife specialist with K-State Research and Extension. He's along with us every Tuesday right here. And our time is away for today. As always, we thank you for being along with us and welcome you right back here tomorrow at this same time. Until then, Eric Atkinson for Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.